I want to welcome you all to the OVA Venture Summit 8, which is entitled Unearthing the Entrepreneurial Economy. My name is Jim Wiseman. I am the current president of the Ohio Venture Association, and this is my second or third time emceeing this event, so hopefully I'll get it right this time. Over the course of the last couple of weeks, some folks have come up to me and asked me, what the heck does that title mean, Unearthing the Entrepreneurial Economy? So I figured in my sort of State of the State or State of the OVA speech that I'm entitled or obliged to give, I'd actually maybe tell you a little bit of a story instead about how we came up with that name. As we were brainstorming about the topic for this year's summit, I thought back to my involvement with a local startup, a healthcare insurance IT solution, which was started up some dozen or more years ago now. And the more I dwelled on the trials and tribulations we encountered in building our company, which in the full interest of disclosure, I was not the company's founder, I was the 9th employee, but I pulled the details in this story from the company's co-founder, and I used the royal we here simply for clarity's sake. But as we were building the company, the more I realized what today's topic needed to be. So when our company was founded in 1999, we were forced to find angel investors. And the founders spent countless months rounding up early-stage capital from over 40 different angel investors. Given that we were developing a software solution, we needed to raise over $1 million for the product development alone. And please note that by the end of the journey in 2001, we had spent over $2 million on software development, but we still hadn't produced a working beta. Now, in order to find a software development the specialization we needed, we had to look to the coasts for a developer. We couldn't find anyone in our backyard. And as we sought venture capital, almost none of which existed in our backyard as well, we chose to engage with an investment bank out of New York, hoping that they could convince East or West Coast capital to invest in Cleveland. Now, the story goes on from there, and you can imagine what we went through in those 2 short years. But by the end of the day, we had spent over $3 million, had no finished product, nor any local partners to show for all the efforts we had put in. So let's flash forward to today. Starting a healthcare IT company in 2013, our founders would likely receive some initial support from one of the local incubators or seed stage support entities like FlashStarts or Bizdom or the Youngstown Business Incubator. We would be reviewed for investment by Glide or Jumpstart and have the North Coast Angels and other statewide angel groups like the Ohio Tech Angels or Queen City Angels take a position in our company and present us to their large member group for further sidecar investment. Our software could be developed locally by Lean Dog on a budget of 1/10 of what we spent and no doubt completed on time. And I'm sure of this, that BioEnterprise, in its infinite wisdom, would have brought us under their wing and given us strategic guidance and a myriad of introductions to their strategic partners and investors from around the country. The story that I'm telling you of support and capital could go on. Today, our entrepreneurial economy is rich, and given the recent numbers from the Midwest Healthcare Investment Report, it's very fertile. Last year, over $220 million was invested in Cleveland area healthcare companies, more than anywhere else in the entire Midwest. So with the clarity of hindsight, it's because of stories like the one I'm just telling you that the Ohio Venture Association wanted to take this opportunity to unearth our entrepreneurial economy. Please join me as I welcome the members of our first panel, which will talk about support for the early entrepreneurial economy, and that's the cultivation of the next generation. If I can have our panelists join us. Moderator for today is John Dearborn. He's the president of Jumpstart. John leads Jumpstart's collaboration efforts, community outreach, and support services. His guidance of Jumpstart's fundraising activities contributes to the organization's assuming a role within Ohio as a leading entity for funding and coordination efforts of entrepreneurial support organizations within the region's entrepreneurial ecosystem. Prior to joining Jumpstart, John was the CEO and a board member of 3 Guppies, Inc., a mobile social networking company in Seattle, Washington. Before that, he was Senior Vice President and General Manager for New Ventures in the Interactive Division for American Greetings, where he served as entrepreneur in residence. John led new product and business development activities, partnering with leading companies to develop content offerings aimed specifically at mobile and instant messaging audiences. This goes on. John also started a self-funded company that developed the first image editor for the PC, which was later sold to a NASDAQ-traded company called Micrographics. In addition to holding senior management positions for a variety of venture-backed publicly and privately held companies, leading marketing, operations, business development, and sales organizations. John is a board advisor to several Cleveland startups, offering expertise in the areas of strategy development, fundraising, and product development. John holds a BA in administration from the University of New Hampshire. Joining John on the panel are Marcia Hales, the business advisor for the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program, George Buzzy, who's the entrepreneur in residence at Youngstown Business Incubator, Charles Stack, the founder of FlashStarts, and Matt Bayer, Director of Business Development at Lean Dog. So please join me in welcoming our panel.
Well, that was tragically long. Sorry about that for that introduction. I guess that just means I'm getting older. So it's nice to be up here, and thanks for that introduction, Jim, and I appreciate the warm welcome this morning. Good morning to everybody. This early start. Nice to be up here behind a podium so that, because I'm colorblind and really good chance my socks don't match, so you won't notice that then, so that's a good thing. So Jim, in his opening remarks, talked about an evolving ecosystem, and as we were preparing for this panel earlier in the week and we organized a phone conference, we talked about, you know, let's really review what was once here and how much we've evolved, and I'll give a few statistics on that to put some meat on the bone to Jim's story, and then turn over the panel. But Charles reminded me very quickly that, you know, that's all great, but for the entrepreneurs that are here today and that are starting business today, it's more about what have you done for me lately? So while it has evolved to a great degree, there's a lot more in terms of that evolution that's needed, and we're going to talk about that this morning, both in terms of what could be beneficial to the entrepreneur themselves, but also how the bar has raised. Because if you did go out today with a plan to raise $3 million without a beta, you wouldn't make it very far. So the bar is rising quite significantly based on all the support, based on the competition for money. And so while the money is increasing, the deal flow is increasing along with it. But it's mainly good. So while the title is Cultivating the Next Generation, what we really mean by that is the next generation of the first-time entrepreneurs. And in our system here in Northeast Ohio, which covers about 40% of the state, which is prescribed by the state's Third Frontier Entrepreneurial Signature Program, we cover a pretty vast area. 6 out of the 10 top cities are here, 40% of the state's population, GRP about the size of Singapore. So it's a pretty significant area. And you know, the reason I bring that up is because one organization can't do it all, and we've realized over the course of time that it does take a village, not to be too trite, but it does take a number of folks to help drive that. But to give you some statistics around what this means in terms of its evolution. In 2004, there was $103 million invested in 36 deals. In 2012, there was over $200 million, which doesn't sound like a lot in terms of doubling of money, but the deals tripled, 105 deals. So there are more deals getting that seed stage or pre-seed stage. In fact, I think it's a little bit sooner than pre-seed. It's more spore stage, if there is such a thing. And if you hear that, then you heard it here first. But so if you think about that, that's a significant improvement. And in 2007, in the 5 years, 2007 to 2012, there was, almost $1 billion in 472 deals. So in the last 5 years, just the amount of money, again, not significant, raised, significant increase over the previous 5 years of about 26% of total dollars raised. But in terms of the deals, 472 deals, that was 2.3 times the previous 5 years. So when you talk about deal flow and the rate of deals and the amount of activity going on, it's quite significant. I think a couple other statistics, and I'll turn it over to the panel, but in 2004, 10% of the deals had significant angel money starting out. In 2012, 50% of the deals had significant angel money starting out. Now, There's a couple of reasons for that we see in observations. One is that a lot of folks are taking an interest in starting to invest in and draw from their wealth to get involved in this entrepreneurial set of activity. It's exciting, it's interesting, there's money to be made, but I think it's more about really being involved. And North Coast Angel Fund has been a big reason for that, but others have caught on to this trend. So that's I think, a big thing, a big reason for it. But the other thing is that, as we all know, venture capital, as many of you are aware, venture capital is changing quite significantly as well. Funds are moving towards later stage deals, funds are contracting, there's a lot of, there's less capital in that seed and pre-seed area, so folks are stepping up to fill that void. Thankfully, folks are stepping up to fill that void here locally out of their own wealth, and that's a good thing. One last statistic, in 2004, there were, and this is going to be under the category of investors who made their first equity investment in Northeast Ohio, and in 2004 there were 4 of those that made their first equity investment in Northeast Ohio. In 2012 there were 32. So when we're talking about trying to attract capital to this area, whether it's an EcoGen in Akron that a couple of years ago got $10 million from Dresser Rand, a strategic investor, went out and hired a full-time recruiter. You're talking about real economic impact. Fresh dollars coming from outside of Ohio into Ohio, people being hired to fill those jobs. This is an important, the reason we all do this work. So some statistics to again, put some meat on the bone. And then now let me turn to the panel, because we're fortunate that we've got I guess all panels are distinguished, but maybe this could be super distinguished, if there is such a term, but a very distinguished panel from the vantage point that you have folks that have started their own company, in some cases multiple times, raised their own capital, put their own money into deals, generated wealth for both themselves and their shareholders, and also put that wealth back into deals. So have been both, have raised money, exited, put their money into deals, have nurtured companies themselves, have formed organizations to help further nurturing those companies in some cases. So they've been on all sizes, and I think bring a great perspective, because no matter what we talk about of this system, at the end of the day, it's about folks doing this for the first time and trying to help those and being able to walk in their shoes. Because if you can't walk in their shoes, it becomes challenging to understand what they're going through and maybe what their particular needs are. So I think we've got great experience to draw from a set of questions. And why don't I start with Marcia to give you a brief background on each. We'll go through and give just a quick background on each of their CVs, their mini CVs, if you will. Great. And we'll start with Marcia.
Thank you. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've had 14, I think, companies over the last 20, 30 years. Today, I get the pleasure of being a business advisor with the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses Initiative. We actually work with companies that are at least 2 years old, but a great number of them come from incubators and accelerators throughout the region. We provide a free educational program to businesses that qualify, and I get to be an advisor to 12 each semester. And it's they're dealing with all of the issues that we all deal with, except they're a little bit older. But we certainly support the incubator community. We reach out to them all the time, looking for potential applicants.
Go ahead, Matt. Matt Beyer?
Yeah, my name is Matt Beyer. I definitely stand in the shadow of the rest of this panel in terms of that distinguished category. But I'm representing Lean Dog. So we focus on custom mobile and web applications. But about a year ago, we launched Lean Dog Labs, where we work with entrepreneurs and startups, helping them map out the technical effort required to take their business to market. And if nothing else, give them the information to understand what that complexity looks like. We are also located on a 120-year-old steamboat down in Lake Erie, right near the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We also have a unique business space that we're very proud of.
Charles?
Charles Stack. I won't tell you about my bio. It's 3 pages long, and I printed out 2 copies at their table. So if anybody wants to come see my bio, I have a 2 copies of a 3-page one at my desk. You can also look me up on LinkedIn. What am I doing today? I started FlashStarts, which is a startup accelerator. And I looked at the landscape that John describes, and it's a very accurate assessment both of where we were and where we are today. but there's still a big piece missing. So if startups are the building blocks for the new economy, who's building the startups? Well, I'm going to raise my hand and say I am, Paul Allen is, Morris Wheeler is. We're the ones building the startups. Lean Dog is. That's what's needed. We have 600,000 college students in Ohio, 300 universities. That's the raw material for these startups. What FlashStarts does is take those raw materials a really tiny bit, 1/10 is about right compared to a few years ago, really tiny bit of cash, and force them to focus. If you have any college students in your life, you know that that's a big challenge. But that's what an accelerator does to some extent. It forces them to focus and iterate through as rapidly as possible on that, no, that didn't work, no, that didn't work, no, that didn't work, and get accustomed with try and fail and repeat until you have a success. That's the magic, if there is magic, in an accelerator, and that's what FlashStarts is doing, and we have a table out there, and I'd be happy to talk to you more about it, but my pitch in this presentation is totally around the community economic benefit. And if you stay up until lunch, I'll be passing this book out. This is Brad Feld, Startup Communities, and it's about what Boulder did over the last few years to build a robust startup community. And a lot of the pieces are in place. We're particularly good on cooperation compared to some communities, but there's a lot more to still be done. So hang through lunch, which we're sponsoring, so you have to think about us during lunch. But prior to lunch, I'll give these out. In case you get stuck at a bad table, you have something to read.
And on that subject of Brad Feld's book, and Charles is kind enough to lug those around to events that he goes to. I'm a fan of Nail It, Then Scale It. If you've not read that book, it's a great book for IT. But besides the book, we also have someone here. There's Morris Wheeler, who has spent time with Brad and spends time in Boulder, Colorado. So Morris, if you want to hear about it firsthand, come on, don't be shy. There he is. You can hear about it firsthand and you know, hear about what's gone on out in Boulder, which has been quite interesting. George?
As I started my career, I started off working with really large companies. I'm a former Deloitte consultant. So it seems like over the years, the companies I've worked with have gotten progressively smaller. So I started off with General Motors, and now I'm an investor in 4 startups. I've worked in healthcare as a CEO, software, and manufacturing. And after selling my last manufacturing company in specialty chemicals, I started getting into the venture capital space. So through AG Partners and Blue Olive Partners, 2 groups I'm associated with, we're invested in 4 companies, 3 here, 1 in Philadelphia. The one here that's a lot of people know is Spark-based. We were the founding investors after Doug and his mom and dad. And that's becoming quite a success story. And then John recruited me to be the entrepreneur in residence for not only the Youngstown Business Incubator, but for the whole Jumpstart system. So everything from Lorain and 21 counties, including Tech Hudson, Jumpstart, and YBI. So most of the technology deal flow at some point tends to flow through me. In the last year and a half, I've touched over 200 companies and helped a number of them raise pretty significant follow-on money.
So George, on that theme, you've been at this for 18 months and you've seen now, I would imagine, probably hundreds?
200. 200
deals, and you've seen a number of different challenges unique to each individual, but at the same time, you've also seen common challenges. So, I mean, to some of the earlier points raised, what do you see today, specifically in IT, as some of the recurring challenges in the system today, and with the bar raising, what that means to the whole system?
And I know it's something we've all seen, but I see it still every day. People building a solution and then go around looking for a problem to solve. And they just don't do enough market research to determine what the pain point is. Is there really a problem? Do people want to stand in line to pay for that solution? And they don't do the homework first. They jump right to development and try to pull together an MVP, and they're either unwilling or, in many cases, unable to do that kind of market research themselves.
Okay, that's good, and that might be a great segue, Charles, to what you've seen. So Charles has, you know, again, been a founder, invested his own money in startups, had successful exits, and now is at this point of giving back to the community, and why did you undertake this most recent effort, and what are you seeing as challenges, and how that addresses those challenges with FlashStarts?
Well, the simple personal answer is, if doing one startup is fun, 10 is more, right? So that's the simple answer. So I'm looking to, the beauty of a startup is to some extent the personal adventure, and you could partake of that directly as an entrepreneur. You can take part in that, and I think VCs would deny it, but part of it is the visceral thrill of participating with an entrepreneur, even if it's indirectly, and it's like being a grandparent, right? You share your grandchild's success in some bizarre way, even though you're not in the court or you're not taking the SAT with them, but they do great, and you're proud and happy. It's that personal adventure part of it. So that's the personal answer for why I'm doing it. The community support piece, and to talk about the customer access point of it, the single most important thing that many of you can give back to the community is a little bit of time. I don't know how many of you want to be entrepreneurs and start a company. If you do, apply to our accelerator. But if you just want to help and have that sense of personal adventure, we have mentoring positions, as do Business and Launch House. Mentoring positions available where you can get that same sense of adventure. We also have the investment as an opportunity, investing in the startups that come out. But most importantly, if you're a large corporation, the thing that you have that's incredibly valuable to give back to the community is a couple of hours. So we're about to launch a sponsorship program where large corporations will just give a commitment of 8 hours to startups. And that time could be used by a startup to come in and say, is this a stupid idea? And get that 15-minute phone call with somebody in purchasing at Progressive, or a doctor at the Cleveland Clinic, or an IT person at PNC. That 15 minutes is worth thousands of dollars and hours to a startup. So one of the things we're going to start doing is going around to each of you that work in big companies and say, make a public proclamation that you're going to give over the course of the year and the course of your 500 to 10,000 employees, give 8 hours to the startup community and respond to their inquiries about, is this a good idea?
Thanks. So turning to Marcia for a second, because we've talked a lot about startups, venture capital, equity-based deals, and Goldman Sachs is 10,000 small businesses is we were the seventh city selected in this program. One of the big reasons was because they saw a vibrant system in Northeast Ohio, and they didn't want to bring something here that could be quickly orphaned. They wanted it to be sustainable over time, and so but it's different in the sense that you have to be an existing company that has growth prospects, that has a certain size, a certain amount of revenue, and doesn't have to be technology-based, but somebody that can get in an intensive program and form a growth plan based on, it's really a mini MBA almost. And so just turning to you in terms of what are you seeing for some of the common challenges with these existing businesses where you're doing this gardening, so to speak?
Well, I think the biggest thing that our participants find is that they finally have a place where they can let their guard down and be vulnerable and share with their peers what their challenges are in a safe environment. And in our first cohort that graduated last month, probably of the 36, probably 33 are actually doing business with each other. And they now have a peer network. One of the really great things that they've created is that they've created their own advisory boards going forward. So they're continuing to get together outside of the program because they've gotten to know each other and each other's businesses so well that they are continuing to work together to help each other get where they want to go. The whole basis of our program is to drive local revenue and increase job growth. And we're doing that. Our first group collectively hired 43 people over the course of just the 3 months of curriculum, and those were for all new positions. And that's probably one of the greatest things to come out of this program is that they're creating their own ecosystem of businesses that are a minimum of 2 years old. Some are 100 years old.
Yeah.
And they're sort of reinventing themselves and sort of joining the 21st century. In a lot of cases, they're technologically challenged, and we've got younger participants that are much more technologically savvy, and so they're able to share that knowledge and get themselves up to speed without us having to do it for them, which is great. Yeah.
Well, thanks. So Matt is, I don't know how much those outside of Cleveland know about Lean Dog, but it's in the old Hornblowers restaurant down on the waterfront. And in fact, when I first met them a few years ago, John Stahl and the founders, and went down there to take a look at it, they were still getting people walking up saying, where's lunch served?
Yeah.
Right? So people.
Can I use your bathroom?
That's right. Can I use your bathroom? So some old habits die hard sometimes. But I then wasn't down there for probably another 18 months and went back, and they moved to some temporary space by the airport on the waterfront. And when you walk in, you can feel, this is the latest and greatest from a project management, lean startup model, and really could feel the energy in the room and that vibe, and I think brings a great perspective to how to get things launched quickly. So in terms of the new program that you've launched, and again, along this theme of what are you seeing for challenges and consistent challenges that come through your door, and have an idea, and they're all excited, and if we only sell 2% of the people in the U.S., it's going to be huge, and what are you seeing for some of the common challenges?
Well, Matt? I think Charles touched on it. A lot of people walk in the door, they've got great ideas, but they're thinking, hey, this is going to be the next Facebook. Well, let's slow down a little bit and really just pare it down to what is the most important set of features that we can focus on that's going to get you to a better position to then start going out and demoing your product and trying to raise additional capital. So that's really kind of the spirit of our whole program is let's focus on what are those most important features.
So that minimally viable product that can go out and do some market testing.
Right. Because for us, our expertise is in actually developing the software. What's encouraging, though, is really it kind of speaks to the community because I see several familiar faces in the room right now. But everyone knows each other. They're all referring to the same programs, the same folks who are referring them to one another. So it's, it speaks to the support in the community.
Yeah. And one of the reasons we do this together is because the community of investors, whether it's an angel investor or a venture capital investor, is relying on us to help fill some of those gaps in the arguments so that when we do refer them, they don't come back to us and say, how did I ever get a hold of that deal? That doesn't make any sense to me, right? And it's sometimes difficult because folks that haven't raised money, having to walk through a disciplined process to say, you've got major holes in the following 2 or 3 areas, and it might be that the product hasn't done any significant market testing, or they don't understand the market dynamics yet, or some of those challenges. They're excited, enthusiastic, maybe put some of their own money in, but they're missing some of those key arguments. And so the notion that we can work together to help block and tackle to fill some of those arguments, or to go through a fast failure situation or a major pivot, so that by the time they get through that period, then they'll have a better shot at, maybe not 100% certainty, but with the bar raising, I think that's an important point. So when you take a look at some of the areas we've touched on, which are IT, I guess that's, these are common sets of challenges in IT. And now we've got 3, I presume your accelerator, or I shouldn't say I presume, but I know that BizDom is generally looking at IT deals. Launch House Accelerator is generally looking at IT deals. There's a healthcare accelerator in Chicago. I think they've moved that now HealthBox to Boston as well. So we're seeing that accelerator model advance, but typically it's been IT. I guess the question is, we're not known for being the center of IT in the universe, but do we have enough there? Do we have too much there, or how big is that gap, Charlie, from your perspective?
Well, the accelerator model works best for IT companies because you're literally building something out of nothing. Software is an infinite resource. And the big, the big change that explains all of this is you can build a global business in a week. And I think that once that thought fully permeates the way you view the world, everything changes. I mean, it's so different now than in the past. The ability to reach the entire globe, or at least those of us that are on the internet, in a week by launching a website and a startup has changed all the equations with which we're familiar. And in IT, you made it out as if it was a category.
Right.
Yeah, well, name me something that you're going to launch today that doesn't involve IT, and I'll show you a really bad idea. So that's my answer.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't know for anyone who, Jack Dorsey is the founder of Twitter. He spoke last night at the Cleveland Clinic, their Ideas program. He said the architecture of Twitter is essentially the same as it was. He wrote it in 2 weeks. It's really the same thing, but it's just kind of the simplicity of that idea. And you can touch anywhere on the globe with that. But yeah, in terms of how technology touches all these different areas. For Lean Dog, we're traveling to the West Coast quite a bit. And I mean, it's not just Cleveland. It's out in San Francisco, these jobs, people with these skill sets are in demand everywhere.
Right.
So it's not like Cleveland is in a worse position than a lot of these areas. We just don't necessarily have the buzz of a Silicon Valley, but the demand is everywhere.
I think it's interesting to me because the ideas are here, and George, if you want to speak to this, but some of the talent challenges, because we don't have a Carnegie Mellon down the street. We're not pushing out lots of computer science degrees, and we're seeing the fact that we have limitations, so that folks that you may see typically generating their own MVP because they're a programmer or their best friend's a programmer. What we see more often happening is folks coming with the idea but no programming assistance, why they're going to Lean Dog, right? To say, how do I get that MVP out? Because otherwise, what was happening a year or 2 years ago, similar to Jim's story, is if you'll just give me $200,000, I'll get my prototype built and then I'll go see if the dogs will eat the dog food. And that just won't happen now. The times have changed. So if we don't have that programming talent close at hand, I remember a couple of years ago we were talking about this issue, and somebody that worked for me said, well, I'll go to the Ruby on Rails user group here in Cleveland. And he showed up, and there were 4 people there. So, the most advanced technologies, the most advanced methodologies in terms of project management, iterations, quick to build up systems. Now we've got accelerators hopefully filling some of that gap, and they are filling that gap, whether it's Bisdom or Launchhouse, helping to really bring them through that, and Charles's situation. So we do have gaps being filled, but we still need that talent, right? That's part of the challenge. So as we think about the foundation for this and the foundation for the future, George, I'd be interested in your year and a half, kind of the changes you're seeing, but what's next in terms of foundational elements for, where do we take this next, or how do we get to the next level?
Well, I think, kind of going back to being a Data Vantage, and we sold it to Micros in 2004. And at that time, we had about 100 developers between Cleveland and Boston. And over 50% of them were from outside of the United States. We had a whole department that did green cards, and we had people from all over the world in our development staff. And that's changed. I've kept in contact with people at Data Vantage, and I'm sure, Highland is another example of having a lot of development resource where, they're not having to do as much of that. So I think, going forward, I think the educational facilities and the market itself are indeed producing more of that talent. Is it enough? No. But there is more resource out there with people like Lean Dog and others that we work with, as well as what's coming out of the schools now with Case as a hacker club. And, I think people are able to muddle through and get the resources here locally to get what they want to have done. But, there's still a big vacuum there in terms of demand exceeds resource.
Mm-hmm. And I think from the standpoint of the talent and the team that you're trying to draw into Lean Dog is a for-profit entity, right? Where are you drawing from, or what are you having to do to draw some of the talent in there, Matt?
Yeah, well, and this is the exact same question that a lot of our larger customers in terms of more established organizations are asking us. And it's not those traditional, you know, you put a job posting on monsters.com, you're not going to get the kind of person that you really want. So it's through those meetups, supporting these causes that, you know, we've been fortunate to host Cleveland Give Camp, where we pair up nonprofits that otherwise don't have budgets for technical projects with volunteers that are willing to dedicate a weekend to build a database, a mobile app, a website. And so what that is a concentration of the right type of people who are doing this type of work for the right reasons, all getting together. And that, you know, for Lean Dog was a great event. For us, it raised awareness around what we were doing. But it's getting involved in those types of events, those meetups where it's really just a forum to talk about technology and just kind of self-educate that companies and startups need to tap into.
Yeah, Hacker Society at Case is not lacking for folks that want to come and connect with them. It's a small group, but they're talented individuals, and there's job offers coming in, I think, just at about every meeting. But one thing I do want to point out is we've had largely an IT-centric discussion here, and you know, the state in its Third Frontier program really looks to say strategically what areas do we have the greatest strength in Ohio, and then they ask us in Northeast Ohio, what are your greatest strengths? And certainly IT is our largest set of activities and deal flow. It's also our lowest yield, and that's somewhat the nature of IT, right? Not yield from the standpoint of an idea coming down into a funded entity and something that gets up and running. But it's also, you know, characterizes the challenges that you have in getting something from that idea state down into a funded thing. But biosciences, while it's number 2, it is by far the greatest generator of follow-on funding and employment and other kinds of statistics because of our strengths of what's taking place at the clinic and the funded research, what's taking place within the institutions themselves, whether it's you know, the clinic or other areas, clinic, Case Western, university hospitals, and now Akron getting organized around the Austin Bioinnovation Institute in Akron and all the healthcare system there and the research coming out of that. So we have a very rich system in the biosciences, advanced materials based on our long history in that area, whether from the polymer side or from what's taking place with the Sherwin-Williams that's been here for over a century. So we've got great strength, and you know, lastly in these other categories, but I would say advanced energy, where we've got great manufacturing know-how and strength and what that means to being able to do something in that area. So lots of other areas to draw upon, lots of other strengths that we pay attention to, but IT certainly is one that keeps us all busy. So with that, being respectful of time here, I want to take a few minutes and just take some questions from those here, some from the Cleveland area, but I see many other faces from outside, from Toledo and Cincinnati and across the state. So maybe from the local folks or others, who wants to be the icebreaker question here? I see lots. Got to be someone. Yes.
Hi, I'm Mark Chance from Case Western Reserve University.
Hey, Mark.
In the IT space, what should we be doing in terms of the workforce development piece? Right? There are needs and there are growth. It's just sort of mentioned computer science, but I assume there's more to it than that, right? There's various other phases that we can provide training opportunities or motivations. What should we be doing there?
So one of the things we've been exploring at Lean Dog, and I think we're aggressively looking to launch in June, is the idea of a boot camp, because the educational system, while obviously there's a lot of knowledge to gain there in terms of those relevant job skills so that a developer can hit the ground running, unfortunately isn't something that's necessarily taught in the curriculum. And also organizations are willing to invest in putting their current employees through a program like this. So that's an idea that we've been kicking around for quite a bit and have validated that is something that is in demand.
Charlie, get some ideas
I
around that?
think the biggest structural flaw with most universities is the lack of cross-disciplinary pollination. And that's where some of the greatest opportunities are for new ideas. So if Case, and not to pick you, any university could have their entrepreneurship programs get the hell out of the business school and go across to all the different colleges in the university and unite the concepts of entrepreneurship between engineers and architects and artists and musicians and the entire breadth of what's going on in colleges, I think you'll see enormous synergies come out from that. So that's my biggest single pitch on what universities can do.
Sorry, Charles, didn't mean to cut you off. George?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, but I think also on a practical standpoint, I was out at a high school this week. They had an entrepreneurial class there, AP students, so very bright students. And they were trying to foster ideas and creativity, and so I was kind of a mentor of one of the groups. And their idea for a business was a self-driving car, which is nice. I'd like to have a self-driving car, but that's like $100 billion in 2 decades of research. I mean, it's a science project and kind of a cool one, but it really isn't an entrepreneurial business at this point. So I wish the entrepreneurial programs would both foster creativity and ideas, but with a sense of practicality to it as well.
And I guess my answer might be if there could be a partnership with the Cleveland Institute of Art, because one of the common challenges that I see, and I think George would agree, is in the design side. So something where you could say, before I get out to, launch this idea, let me do some quick designs, some mock-ups, some ideas around what this might look up, so I can get out in front of some clients and see if this actually could sell. Would they actually connect with this in a meaningful way? And if you have those design resources, great, but I think, Cleveland Institute of Art would be a great place to partner with and bring that cross-pollination as Charlie talks about. And the other thing is with universities is you often see business plan competitions where money is awarded, and it's for winning the award versus starting a business, and I think that's fine, but I think we need to take it a step further as we evolve to say, that's for starting a business. It's not for the next best keg party on campus because you won $1,000. Or 2 out of $1,000 these days, unless the price of beer has gone up. But can we actually start something and bring it through one of the accelerators and have you see this in Y Combinator or others where they're directly linked to funding sources, so that when they're through their program, they're right into a funding source. Could we have something where it's linked that way to an accelerator that says, when you're through this money goes to your business, you go into the accelerator, you keep going, you keep progressing. So it's a very serious undertaking versus, again, the funding of a party or some other, how I'd use it. But sorry, other questions? Yes, Morris.
Are we doing our entrepreneurs a disservice by suggesting that Cleveland should be emulating Silicon Valley and turning out venture-backed $500 million companies?
I'm not going to answer that. You can answer that, Charles?
You're asking me, Morris. I don't think it's a disservice. But I think there needs to be a recognition that there are other models that might be better suited for a region like ours. And one of the things that I stress and have always stressed is that a dollar from a venture capitalist is worth way less than a dollar from a customer. They may look the same, right? But that dollar from a customer didn't involve dilution. It provided education, because you now know that you have a product or a service for which a customer will pay. It also means there's probably another dollar behind it, which is not always the case with the venture capital firm. So from that standpoint, maybe a little different focus on cash flow positive and less focus on follow-on funding might be appropriate for our region.
George, you want to?
Yeah, I just to pile on to that, I agree completely. I think people tend to focus too much on venture capital and all of that, and I've always been, let's just focus on solving a problem and delighting the customer and having the customer buy what we've got. So that's the answer to all businesses, delight the customer and have them pay you for your service or your solution. If you do that, everything else will just kind of fall into place.
Right. And it's somewhat misunderstood the way the system is measured as we talk about level A's and follow-on funding, but level A's actually include revenue, and it's the top of the house. I mean, it's one thing that we do spend an awful lot of time on, and especially in IT, because as you get into pharma or biodevices or those kinds of things, those are going to take years and lots of money, and you've got to have your financing in place or a good plan for it, or you will not succeed. You're going to plan on the long haul, whereas in IT, you better have the customers in place and a connection to revenue way early on, and do that for as little money as you can, because you're going to have to pivot, you're going to have to you're going to have to change your direction at some point. So you better not have 3 million behind you when you're about to pivot, or that's going to be a painful pivot. Hopefully you've got 25 or 50,000 or less behind you when you're ready to pivot. So I do think that customer focus is super critical in the IT in particular. The others, I think, do just take longer to gestate. But even if it is, I was meeting with an anesthesiologist this week, and he's been at this for, I think now, 5 years on a particular product, and had 2 human trials in place, and had talked to 4 anesthesiologists in 5 years. So yes, it's going to take a lot of funding. Yes, it's going to take regulatory approval. Yes, it's going to take years to get that product in the market, but it doesn't take years to go have a conversation with 40 anesthesiologists, right? And I don't mean to pick on him, but you know, we see that often cases because the business development, the sales, the revenue side is overlooked. So I don't know if that gets at your question, Morris, but I think that's what you're getting to. Others?
I'd like to just add something to what he said.
Sure.
When I was looking to raise capital for Stairs Corporation, what was to become Stairs, we had one of the larger VC firms in town come out to visit us in Willoughby, and after we spent an hour or so with him, he talked about all his West Coast ventures. He showed him out to the parking lot. He had a nice Porsche 911 or whatever it was. So, you know, one of the problems with this area is there's just not enough people driving cars like this. Needless to say, we didn't go with him. But having worked with a lot of companies and trying to get, I had the pleasure, or not pleasure, but the frustration of dealing with a manufacturing company that wanted to do electric lawnmowers, electric things, and it was almost zero interest. Anything had to do with manufacturing, which is what Cleveland needs. It needs new
Right.
manufacturing technology, and it frustrates me. I'd like to see what everything I see is IT, you know, stuff like that, medical products, of course.
Right, right. So the question relates to great focus, but you know, what about playing to our strengths and manufacturing being one of our strengths? And I think, Marcia, you can talk to what we're doing. Yeah, go ahead,
Can I
Charles.
just get one line out?
You may, Charles.
FlashStarts manufactures startups.
There we go.
FlashStarts manufactures startups.
Just,
So, but that was my moment.
so the 10,000 small businesses, so one of the things that's happening that we're seeing a lot of attention around, not just what we're seeing, but you're seeing across the country, is this notion of economic gardening that says, sure, we want to make sure we have a robust environment for startups. We want to be welcoming and inviting and have friendly capital and have services available to these startups. But then there's existing businesses that might be at $1 million or $2 million or $5 million that have hit the cellophane ceiling and can't quite break through to that next revenue level because their head's down, they're capital constrained, you know, they're unable to step back and say, what's the next great opportunity for this company? And so the ability to interact with companies like that and solve for those growth issues. So one of the tenets of the 10,000 Small Businesses program, and it's just one of several, is to say you've got to step away and you've got to be able to commit to stepping away from that business for a whole day, and for how many days in the 11. Class? 11 days. 11 days, full days, to sit around and really brainstorm that business with a set of very dedicated folks like Marcia and others, and their peers in the room, to say we're going to come out of this on the other side with a growth plan, and to see the looks on their faces at the end of that program and what they've gained and what they've learned. I mean, that's so. It's one thing, Ray, it's not an entire thing, but it's a movement that we're seeing in the PRISM program. I think John Schober's here from Magnet, and what they're doing to help manufacturing companies, specifically around this notion of a growth plan for an existing company, and what may require a pivot, because we've been making the same products for automotive, and we've got to move over to aerospace, right? Because that's where the next big market is. So there's a lot being done there. And you know, some of it is still, we still have capital challenges. There's still capital constraints, even at the banking level, where people are having to pledge their assets of their building, property to get working capital, right? So it's still not perfect yet, but I think there is more attention being placed there.
Just kind of add to that. And I think there's sometimes the lines are blurred, where it's an IT play, but it's also a manufacturing play. One example is a company that I've been helping called Boxcast. It's a streaming video electronic device that has a lot of software, firmware, and that kind of intelligence into it But at the end of the day, it's a box. It's an electronic box for streaming video up to a website for sporting events and other things. And with the help of Dave Crane and Magnet, they were able to re-engineer that box in a really elegant form factor. And it will be manufactured, it is being manufactured here in Northeast Ohio and will continue to be. So I think oftentimes, certainly in advanced materials and biomedical, there is a manufacturing component. But even in IT, you know, there can be and often is.
Right. Others? We got 1 more minute left. Jim, one question?
Yeah. You guys, John, I'll add you to this question. You talked about over the past 10 years we've built up quite a ecosystem, and now we're starting to network that ecosystem.
Right.
The groups are talking to each other, interacting. Are we in danger of moving towards a group think kind of mentality in this region, given how small and tight and cohesive we are?
Oh, yeah, I think that's a challenge that we're cognizant of and trying to avoid. But what Jim is referring to is we meet weekly. If you can imagine, you know, this group of folks. There's now 17 collaborators that are sponsored by the state to help entrepreneurs across all technology sectors. We meet weekly to talk about deals coming into the system. And what we try and do, as opposed to groupthink, is do a bit of crowdsourcing from a diagnosis standpoint. It then goes back to, once we're agreeing as what the next steps are, because they're not always subtle. They're generally pretty practical next steps of client feedback or some other things. And then it goes referred back to an individual who then works very closely with that company to iterate, to do whatever is necessary to come back with an update 1 week, 2 weeks, a month later, 2 months later. So, you know, refer them to Lean Dog. That's going to take 2 months. Let's get back with them afterwards and see what happens. So we do have to be careful on that, but we're generally not at a scientific level. We're generally at a pretty basic blocking and tackling level where, you know, looking through that lens of an investor, it's pretty obvious what needs to take place, because again, these are first-time entrepreneurs, and not that they're trying to deliberately miss something, they just have because it's the first time they've done it. So it's not a pass-fail test, it's just trying to fill those gaps as the accelerators do, but as we do, as we try and bring them through the system. But it's something to look out for without a doubt. Can we have one more question? One more? Because I think we've got some flexibility in the schedule. Yes?
You mentioned in the entrepreneurial development process, the number one things to do, of course, are definition of your problem, customer competitive landscape analysis, and customer identification. Are there programs in place here or being grown to do exactly that, and then direct to the industry-specific resources?
Yeah, go ahead. You want to take
Well,
it,
our program is designed to do exactly that. Everyone that participates in our program identifies a very specific growth opportunity that could be a complete new service or product that will dramatically change their operations. And I think we can all agree that entrepreneurs come up with really great ideas. They don't always see the big picture in terms of all the pieces, moving pieces, parts to actually make a company be successful. And so one of the things that all of our participants look at is, you know, they all do a risk assessment and a feasibility study on this growth opportunity to determine whether or not somebody is going to pay what they need to charge to make it a worthwhile venture. I think that, you know, that's...
Yeah, it is. We don't actually do the work, and let me step back, because it's easy to generalize. It's easy to pick on the gaps and why they're there. And let me just say, having bootstrapped something, being an entrepreneur is really hard. It's really, really hard. I respect that. The folks that I work with respect. I mean, it's just can be a real challenge. You know, I quit a job and had a mortgage and car payments and everything else, and leapt into the deep end of the pool with, you know, no capital. So, you know, I can appreciate what folks go through, but we're not here to tell and give the answer necessarily. We're here to help get to that answer, so that the other role that we play is building capacity. Because hopefully this system that's funded by the state and philanthropy and others goes away over time, lessens over time. You know, what's been done is injection of resources to solve for a market failure, of this lack of capital and activity at this sector of the market. But over a course of, you know, 5, 10, 15 years from now, that lessens as it becomes more organic. So we've got to help and be keeping cognizant of the fact that we're trying to build that capacity so that person can help others in an organic fashion versus just, help deliver answers. So I think going through that process is very important, that we're cognizant, even though we might be able to see the problem clearly, rather than just go fix that problem, you're good to go. It's just like, how do we walk through that and make sure there's a full understanding? So that's, I guess, the way to answer it.
One of the things about the program that we provide is that this forces the entrepreneur to take a really hard look at themselves and where are their weaknesses and what's holding them back from actually growing. And oftentimes it's that they don't have the capacity to take the company where it needs to go to achieve their long-term goal. And they identify those areas of weakness and then take a good hard look at who do I need to bring onto my team to make that happen, or who do I need to outsource to, or what resources in the community do I need to reach out to, because I can't do it myself. And that's a really hard thing for entrepreneurs to accept, is that I can't do everything all the time. I admit it, I've been there, and I think I'm going to do it best. And that's one of the really big takeaways for our graduates, is that they can't do it all. And it's acknowledging that, and they're holding themselves back from their own growth. It's a hard thing to accept.
Last point, Charlie, and then we'll wrap it up.
We have time?
Real quickly. I'm feeling the presence of a
So the question about groupthink, we just have to keep asking that. There's no real answer to it, but you have to keep asking that question. So that was great. And the reason is because if everybody thinks it's a great idea, we're pretty sure it's not. It may be good, but it's not great. And then the other part, real quickly, was there's no one critical path. It's almost the same answer. There's no one critical path. Each startup has a different critical path. Now, there are patterns that you can recognize and apply, but there's no cookie-cutter solution to building a successful startup. It's that particular startup's own path to success.
Right. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.